Story begins. The briefcase sat on the counter like a verdict. It was not a briefcase, technically. It was a military-issue canvas duffel bag, the kind that had seen better decades. The olive-drab fabric had faded to the color of old bruises. The brass zipper was seized in 3 places. The stitching along the left strap had frayed to bare threads that hung like loose questions. Water damage had warped the bottom into a permanent bow. And it smelled, not unpleasantly but distinctly, of mildew and machine oil and something else, something older, like the inside of a building that had been closed for 30 years. Jordan Kessler did not pick it up immediately. He looked at it first. That was his habit, and it had served him well. Look before touching, assess before speaking. The 5 seconds of silence before an appraisal told you more than the next 5 minutes of handling ever could. Jordan was 31 years old, and had been running Meridian Antiques and Collectibles on the corner of Halsted and Archer, in Chicago's Bridgeport neighborhood for 4 years. Before that, he had spent 3 years as an assistant appraiser at a higher-end firm in the Loop, and before that 2 years studying material culture and object history at Northwestern, before dropping out when the money ran out and the interest didn't. He was not officially credentialed. He did not need to be. In 4 years at Meridian, he had correctly identified a Revolutionary War-era powder horn dismissed as decorative reproduction, a signed first edition Hemingway that a widow thought was worthless, and a set of Japanese woodblock prints from the Edo period that a estate sale had priced at $12 each. His reputation in the collector community was built on a simple foundation. Jordan Kessler did not miss things. He was not humble about this. Confidence, he believed, was a professional requirement. Doubt was expensive. The man who had brought the bag in was still standing on the other side of the counter, watching Jordan with eyes that did not seem to blink at a normal rate. He was old. How old was difficult to say with precision. His face carried the deep architecture of a man past 80, the channels carved from nose to jaw, the softened jaw, the age spots mapping a lifetime of sun exposure. But his posture was wrong for a man that age. He stood too straight, weight distributed evenly, shoulders squared, the kind of bearing that took years to build and decades to break, and this man's body had not broken yet. He wore a gray wool sweater despite the September warmth, khaki trousers, work boots that had been resoled at least twice, no jewelry, no watch. His hands rested on the counter beside the bag, large hands, the knuckles prominent, the skin thin over the veins. "I called ahead," the old man said. "Yesterday afternoon." Jordan remembered the call. An elderly male voice, brief, said he had military surplus he wanted appraised, did not elaborate. Jordan had said to bring it in before noon. "I remember," Jordan said. "You didn't give me your name." "Garrett," the man said. "Bernard Garrett." Jordan noted the name without writing it down. Then he turned his attention back to the bag. "Okay," Jordan said. "Let's see what we've got." He unzipped the bag where the zipper still moved, peeled back the top flap. Inside, folded canvas, another layer of protection. He pulled it open. The contents were modest. A folded field jacket, olive drab, no patches visible. A canteen with the olive drab cover still on it. A pair of worn leather boots bundled with a bootlace. A small canvas pouch that rattled when he tilted the bag. And at the bottom, something flat, wrapped in oilcloth. Jordan lifted out the oilcloth bundle first. It was heavy for its size. He set it on the counter beside the bag, unwrapped the first layer. Inside was a second layer of oilcloth, newer, showing less weathering. He unwrapped that as well. A map, folded into quarters, yellowed at the edges, the creases worn nearly to translucence. He unfolded it with care, spread it flat on the counter. He recognized it as a military topographic map of Southeast Asia, the grid lines, the elevation markings, the coordinate system in the margins. The scale put it somewhere in the Indochina region. Vietnam, Laos, or Cambodia, he could not determine without better reference points. Across the surface of the map, someone had drawn routes in red ballpoint pen, dashed lines connecting points marked with small circles, each circle containing a handwritten number. The numbers ran from 1 to 11. Jordan looked at it for a long moment. He had appraised military maps before. Vietnam-era materials were common enough in estate sales. Soldiers came home and kept things. Their families kept the things after them. And eventually, everything ended up in auction houses and antique shops. The map alone was not remarkable. But it wasn't the map that stopped him. It was what lay beneath it in the oilcloth bundle. A photograph. Black and white, 4 by 6 inches. The image was sharp, well exposed. Whoever had taken it knew what they were doing. It showed 12 men standing in what appeared to be a jungle clearing. The vegetation behind them was dense and tropical. The men wore a mix of military and civilian clothing, some in fatigues, some in dark trousers and plain shirts. They stood in 2 rows, 6 in front, 6 behind. Their expressions were serious, not staged serious, the way soldiers pose for formal portraits. Actually serious, the look of men who are thinking about something they cannot say aloud. Jordan studied each face in turn. Most were strangers. But near the right end of the back row, almost at the edge of the frame, was a face that pulled him out of his professional detachment. He knew that face. Not from memory exactly. From repetition. From television screens and newspaper front pages and campaign photographs. The face had aged significantly since this photograph was taken, but the underlying structure was unmistakable. The wide jaw, the prominent brow ridge, the particular way the upper lip thinned when the expression was neutral. That was Congressman David Harwell of Illinois, 7th term, ranking member of the House Armed Services Committee, a fixture in Chicago Democratic politics for 30 years, photographed for every major newspaper in the country, whose official biography listed his early career as a congressional aide, then a state legislator, with no mention of military service beyond a brief reference to having served in government roles during the Vietnam era. Jordan set the photograph down carefully, looked at the old man. "Where did you get this?" His tone was still professional, measured. Bernard Garrett's expression did not shift. "It was issued to me," he said, "along with everything else in that bag." Jordan waited, but that wasn't the full story, and Bernard Garrett was not finished. Jordan picked up the photograph again, held it closer. The image quality was military grade, meaning functional, not artistic. No soft focus, no staged composition. This was documentation photography, the kind taken before an operation, not during a celebration. He looked at the 11 other faces, men ranging in age from what appeared to be their mid-20s to early 40s. Diverse backgrounds suggested by their features, a mix of apparent ethnicities that was unusual for standard military photography of the period. In the 1970s, formal unit photographs maintained racial and unit homogeneity as a matter of documented institutional practice. This group did not look like a unit. It looked like an assembly. "What were you?" Jordan asked. "Military?" "The word you're looking for is contractor," Garrett said. "But that's a modern word. In 1975, the word was operative." Jordan set the photograph down. He leaned on the counter with both forearms. In 4 years of running Meridian, he had heard some stories attached to old objects. Grandfathers who had fought in both world wars. Women who had served as nurses in Korea. A man once who brought in a Japanese officer's sword and cried while explaining where it had come from. He was accustomed to history walking through his door in the arms of old people, but this felt different. He could not explain yet precisely why. "Why bring it here?" Jordan asked. "If this is military history, there are archives, the Smithsonian, veterans organizations." "The National Archives." Garrett's eyes moved to the map, then to the photograph, then back to Jordan. "Because archives lose things. Archives get sealed. Archives get managed." He paused. "I needed someone who deals in objects, not records. Objects. Physical things that can be held and verified and cannot be edited." Jordan looked at the bag again, looked at the folded field jacket, at the canteen, at the bundled boots, standard items, nothing remarkable on the surface. Then he looked at the bottom of the bag, the warped, moisture-damaged bottom, the permanent bow that had given the bag its permanent lean. Something about the shape was wrong, not wrong damaged, wrong constructed. He reached into the bag, pressed the bottom with his palm. The material gave slightly, not the way worn canvas gives, the way a surface gives when there is something firm beneath it. A second layer, a false bottom. Jordan looked up. Garrett's expression had not changed, but something had shifted in his eyes. A slight relaxation, like a man who has been holding a door closed and has decided to step back. "Pull the bottom," Garrett said. Jordan found the seam, barely visible, running around the perimeter of the bag's interior, 3 inches from the actual bottom. The canvas was folded over and tacked, not sewn. He worked his fingers along the edge, found where the fold released, and pulled. The false bottom came free with a soft, dry sound. Beneath it, a sealed wax paper packet, the size of a hardcover book. The wax paper was yellowed but intact. The packet was tied with a length of dark twine, the knots military precise. Jordan lifted it out. It was heavier than it looked, dense. He set it on the counter, looked at Garrett. "Open it," the old man said. What happened next changed everything. Jordan untied the twine. His fingers worked carefully. The knots were old but had not degraded, and he did not want to cut them. He got the first knot loose, then the second. He peeled back the wax paper layers one at a time. Inside, a stack of documents, photographs, a smaller envelope sealed. And beneath all of it, a notebook, composition style, black cover, the corners bent soft with age. Jordan spread the documents on the counter systematically. Appraiser's habit. Inventory first, examination second. The documents were typed on what appeared to be standard government paper, the particular cream-white stock that federal agencies used in the 1970s. Most were marked at the top right corner with classification stamps. The red ink had faded to coral, but the word classified was still legible. Some were marked top secret. One was marked eyes only in large block letters. He did not read them yet. He kept inventorying. The photographs were a second set, different from the one in the oilcloth bundle. These were operational photographs taken in the field, showing terrain and structures and, in several images, people. The people in these photographs were not posed. They did not know they were being photographed. Jordan could tell by the angles, taken from elevated positions through foliage, at distances that suggested telephoto lenses. The sealed envelope was addressed by hand in careful block letters, "To be opened in the event of my death or disappearance." Beneath that, Bernard Allen Garrett. Beneath that, and not before. The notebook. Jordan picked it up last. The cover was plain. No writing on the outside. He opened it to the first page. Written in a small, precise hand. Cambodia routing log. November 1974, March 1975, Bia Garrett, Phoenix adjacent, supplementary operations. Jordan set the notebook down. He had heard of Phoenix. In the collector and military history world, Operation Phoenix was not a secret. It had been declassified in stages, investigated by Congress in 1975, written about extensively. A CIA-run counterinsurgency program in Vietnam, targeted assassination, brutal, effective, disputed, officially terminated in 1972, Phoenix adjacent, supplementary operations, 1974 and 1975, after the official termination. Jordan looked at the old man standing across the counter. "Phoenix ended in 1972, he said. "Officially," Garrett said. "This notebook is dated 1974. "Yes, that's not possible. What you're holding in your hand," Garrett said quietly, "says otherwise." Jordan pressed his hand flat against the notebook, felt the worn fabric cover, the soft compliance of old paper beneath. His mind was running calculations he had not been asked to run. The photograph in the oilcloth, 12 men, David Harwell's face, the routing log, Cambodia, 1974. "Who else knows this exists?" Jordan asked. Bernard Garrett paused, 2 full seconds, the kind of pause that contains a complicated history. "Until this morning," he said, "only me." And that's when things took a darker turn. Jordan did not call the police. He considered it for exactly 4 seconds and then set the thought aside. What would he say? An old man brought in a bag of old documents? Nothing visible was illegal. Nothing had been threatened. Nothing had been demanded. The old man had simply placed a collection of objects on his counter and told him to open the false bottom. He also did not ask Garrett to leave. Something in the deliberateness of the man's presence made asking feel wrong. Like asking a surgeon to stop mid-procedure because the incision was making you nervous. Instead, Jordan pulled up a stool on his side of the counter, poured 2 cups of coffee from the pot in the back room, set one in front of Garrett, and said, "Start at the beginning." Bernard Garrett did not sit. He remained standing, hands resting on the counter. He looked at the coffee, did not touch it. He looked at the map. "The numbered points on the map," Garrett said. "Each circle is a location. Each number is an operation." "Operations," Jordan repeated. "Extractions, eliminations, intelligence acquisitions." The language varied by what was required. Jordan looked at the map again. 11 numbered points, spread across what he could now identify, from the river patterns and the shape of the terrain, as Cambodia. Eastern Cambodia, near the Vietnamese border. How many people were involved? In the team? 12. Total support structure, including logistics and communications, perhaps 40. And the photograph? The one in the oilcloth, that's the team. Taken 3 days before the first operation, Garrett confirmed. November 14th, 1974. Jordan pulled the photograph back out. 12 faces. He looked at Harwell's face again, younger by decades, leaner in the jaw, but unmistakably the structure he had seen on television 6 nights ago during the evening news. Harwell had been speaking about defense appropriations, measured, experienced, the voice of a man who understood military matters from a position of authority. "Congressman Harwell," Jordan said. He did not frame it as a question. Garrett's expression did not shift. He was 28, fresh out of Yale Law. Somebody connected knew somebody connected. He came in as a liaison. Civilian oversight, they called it. He was there to observe and report back to a Senate subcommittee that officially did not exist. And unofficially? He approved 3 of the 11 operations. His signature is in the notebook, not his printed name, his operational designation. But I know his handwriting. I watched him write it. Jordan opened the notebook to a random page. Dense handwritten entries, dates, coordinates, abbreviated operational language. At the bottom of one page, a signature block. Authorizing Officer, Cardinal 3. He turned to another page, same designation, and another. Cardinal 3, Jordan said. Harwell, Garrett confirmed. Jordan set the notebook down. His hands were steady. He was good at keeping his hands steady, but beneath the steadiness was something that felt like the floor shifting a quarter inch in a direction floors were not supposed to shift. "Why does this matter now?" he asked. "Whatever happened in Cambodia in 1974, whatever was authorized, the statute of limitations, this isn't about criminal prosecution," Garrett said. His voice was still quiet, but something beneath the quiet had changed. A pressure compressed. "Harwell is going to be appointed to chair the full Armed Services Committee next month. He's been positioned for it for 3 years. He'll have oversight authority over every classified military program currently active, every black budget, every covert operation." Jordan looked at him. "And if he authorized operations that were not legally sanctioned in 1974, Garrett continued, "if he signed approvals for eliminations outside the official Phoenix framework in Cambodia after the official termination, then he has been lying about his background to every oversight committee he has sat on for 30 years. He told Congress he had no operational history. He passed clearance reviews based on that representation." The weight of this settled slowly. Jordan felt it arrive in stages. "He'd have to step down," Jordan said. "More than step down, but that would be the first consequence, yes. And these documents prove it. These documents are the only physical evidence that survived. Everything else was burned in 1978. I burned most of it myself." "This," Garrett gestured at the spread of materials on Jordan's counter. This I could not burn. No one expected what came next. Jordan stood up from the stool. He walked to the front of the shop, looked through the window at the street. Halstead Avenue on a Tuesday morning, a city bus passing, a woman with a stroller, two men in construction gear eating from paper bags on the steps of the building across the street. Normal. Entirely, completely normal. He turned back to the counter, back to Bernard Garrett and the documents and the notebook and the map with its 11 numbered circles. "Who are you?" Jordan asked. "Not your name. Who are you?" The old man's jaw moved slightly, as if the question was worth chewing before answering. "I was a case officer," he said. "CIA. Contract staff. Not full-time employee. Officially, I was a logistics coordinator with an NGO operating in Thailand. That was the cover. The reality was that I ran ground-level operations in Cambodia for 2 years, 1973 and 1974. I recruited locals, handled asset payments, maintained safe houses, coordinated with the team. You were the one who kept records. Somebody had to. And somebody had to keep the records safe if the program got burned. And it got burned. In 1975, Saigon fell. Everything went sideways. The Senate Church Committee started investigating intelligence abuses. Phoenix was already compromised publicly. Our operation, he paused, our operation was terminated with extreme prejudice. That phrase has 2 meanings in the intelligence world. I was told it meant the program. I later came to believe it meant us. Jordan walked back behind the counter. He was processing at a speed that felt uncomfortable. They tried to kill you. They tried to kill all of us. Of the 12 in that photograph, he gestured at the oilcloth image. I know for certain that 4 were dead within 18 months of the program's termination. Car accidents, suicides, a drowning. One classified as missing in action in circumstances that made no sense for the time period. And the others? Scattered. New identities. Some of them were given the same deal I was. New paperwork, new life, don't talk, don't surface. Or your family finds out what you actually did over there, and the government explains that you were a war criminal, working without authorization. His hands had not moved from the counter, but the tendons in them had tightened visibly. They made us choose between our past and our future. Most chose their future. But you kept the documents. Because I knew that someday, someone who had been in that photograph would end up somewhere they should not be. And when that happened, these documents would need to exist. Jordan looked at the photograph again. 12 faces, David Harwell near the right end of the back row. Young, serious, unaware of how many years he had ahead of him and how differently they would go than this moment suggested. You've been waiting, Jordan said. Not an accusation, just recognition. For 30 years, Garrett said, I watched Harwell's career, every campaign, every committee appointment. I waited to see if anyone else knew. Anyone else would surface the truth. No one did. He paused. He was very careful, very thorough. He had the right people helping him stay clean. Then why now? Why this week? Bernard Garrett's hands finally moved. He reached into the pocket of his wool sweater, produced a folded newspaper clipping, set it on the counter. Jordan unfolded it. A brief item from a political newsletter, not a mainstream publication, something specialist, dated 3 weeks earlier. Harwell confirmation hearing set for October 15th, Armed Services Chairmanship, the most significant position in congressional military oversight. October 15th, Jordan said. 12 days from now, Garrett said. The silence between them was not empty. It was full of weight, of consequence, of something that had been carried for 30 years and was now being set down on a counter between an old man and an antiques dealer in Chicago. But that wasn't the full story, and they both knew it. Jordan made a decision in the next 30 seconds that he would spend the rest of his life either defending or questioning, depending on the day and the company. He said, "Tell me everything." And Bernard Garrett told him. He talked for 2 hours. Jordan closed the shop, flipped the sign, locked the front door, killed the overhead lights and switched to the softer lamp in the back corner that made the place feel less like a store and more like someone's study. He brought out the rest of the coffee and 2 more cups and a notepad he used for appraisal notes, and he took notes while Garrett talked. The story came out in the same order Garrett had clearly rehearsed it. Not rehearsed for performance, but rehearsed the way you rehearse testimony, the way you arrange facts so they cannot be distorted later by the selective memory of stress. Operation Brushfire Redux. That was the internal name. Not affiliated with the earlier Brushfire program, the name was a bureaucratic coincidence, one of several classified operations using the same cover designation in different theaters. This one was a supplementary network to the main Phoenix program, running after Phoenix's official termination in 1972, operating with funds laundered through diplomatic cables to Thailand and logistics support that existed entirely off the official books. The objective, 11 high-value targets in eastern Cambodia. Political figures, military officers, infrastructure managers supporting North Vietnamese supply routing into South Vietnam. The theory was that eliminating these 11 people would significantly degrade the supply chain for the final push. The theory was not entirely wrong. The authorization chain went through 3 levels of civilian oversight: a Senate subcommittee that officially did not exist, a National Security Council working group whose meetings were not logged in the NSC calendar, and a liaison officer who reported directly to a deputy director, whose name had been absent from subsequent investigations because he retired in 1973 and died in 1981 and could not be held accountable by anyone for anything anymore. David Harwell, Cardinal 3 in the operational logs, had been the civilian oversight representative for Operations 7, 8, and 11. He had reviewed the target profiles. He had reviewed the operational plans. He had authorized deployment. And when things went wrong on Operation 11, when what was supposed to be a clean extraction turned into a firefight that left 2 team members dead and 3 civilians killed in the crossfire, he had been the one to draft the cover communication that explained the incident as a North Vietnamese ambush on a South Vietnamese patrol unit. The falsification had been meticulous. The 2 dead team members were logged as South Vietnamese military fatalities. The 3 dead civilians were logged as North Vietnamese combatants. The incident report went up the chain with Cardinal 3's authorization stamp on it, was filed, and was buried under 17 layers of sequential classification that would not begin unraveling until the church committee hearings the following year. But by then, Harwell was already out. His 6-month liaison posting ended in January 1975. He returned to the United States with a classified service record that, as far as any official system was concerned, did not exist. He passed the bar exam that spring. He ran for state legislature 2 years later. The rest was public record. Jordan wrote it all down. When Garrett finished, Jordan sat back, looked at his notes, looked at the documents spread on the counter, and said one thing. "You've been alone with this for 30 years. Garrett said nothing. "Why an antiques dealer?" Jordan asked. "Why not a journalist, a lawyer? Why not take this directly to—" "I took it to a journalist in 1989, Garrett said. "Washington Post stringer, military beat. He was interested, very interested. He called me back 4 days later and said he had been advised not to pursue the story. He would not tell me who advised him." "A lawyer?" 1994. A civil rights attorney in D.C. who had handled church committee-adjacent cases. He reviewed the documents, agreed they were significant. He died of a heart attack 8 weeks later. He was 54 years old. The temperature of the room did not change, but Jordan became aware of the temperature in a way he had not been before. "I'm not suggesting he was killed," Garrett said, reading the expression. "I don't know that. Heart attacks happen to 54-year-old men all the time. But I decided after that institutional channels were not safe. So 30 years later, you walk into an antiques dealer." "Not an antiques dealer," Garrett said. "A verifier, someone whose professional function is to authenticate objects, to establish what things are and what they're worth, to create an appraisal record that enters the commercial and documentary system independently of any government archive." Jordan understood. He had understood before Garrett explained it, but hearing it articulated made it more real. "If I appraise these materials," Jordan said, "if I document them professionally, then they exist in a system that is not controlled by any intelligence agency. They're in your records. They're referenced in your invoices. They're part of the commercial chain of documentation that covers provenance in the antiques world. Someone would have to go very far out of their way, through multiple independent systems, to make them disappear." Jordan looked at the documents, the notebook, the photographs. "And if something happened to me," he said. "I made copies in 1989, Garrett said. "They're in 4 different locations. But the originals, the physical objects, those are what matter. Physical objects can be tested. Carbon dating, paper composition analysis, ink degradation testing. You cannot fake 40-year-old paper. You cannot fake 40-year-old photographic emulsion." What happened next changed everything. At 11:47 in the morning, Jordan's personal cell phone rang. He had given the number to almost no one outside his professional contact list. He looked at the screen. Unknown number. He answered. Meridian Antiques. A voice, male, middle-aged, formal without being aggressive. "Mr. Kessler, my name is not important. I'm calling to let you know that we're aware of the visitor you had this morning. I'd like to discuss the materials he may have left with you." Jordan's hand tightened on the phone. He did not look at Garrett. He kept his face neutral. "I have a lot of visitors. Can you be more specific?" "An elderly man, military surplus bag, olive drab canvas. He's been on our radar for some time." A pause. "Mr. Kessler, I want to be very clear that we're not threatening anyone. We're asking, as a matter of national security, that you contact us before taking any action regarding items that may have come into your possession today." "I don't know what you're referring to." "I think you do." A shorter pause this time. "We'd like to send someone to speak with you in person, this afternoon, if possible." Jordan looked at Garrett. The old man had heard enough of the conversation to understand what was happening. His expression had not changed, but his hands, those large, veined hands, had moved from the counter to his sides. "Ready." "I'll need to think about that," Jordan said. "Of course, we'll be in touch." The line went dead. Jordan set the phone down. "How long have they been watching you?" "A while," Garrett said. "They can't touch me directly. I made sure of that years ago. But they watch, and when I move, they notice." "You led them here?" "Yes." The word landed flat and certain in the room. Jordan stared at him, felt the anger forming, and then felt it complicated by something else, something that recognized that this moment, this complication, was not accidental. It was constructed, deliberately. "You wanted them to know," Jordan said. "I needed witnesses," Garrett said. "I needed someone who would react in a way that created documentation." "Your phone answered an unknown number at 11:47 a.m. Your shop security camera," he nodded toward the visible camera in the corner, "has been recording since I walked in. You have a professional log that will note today's date and my visit. I am now part of your recorded business history." Jordan sat down heavily on the stool. "You used me. I gave you a choice. You could have asked me to leave when I walked in. I didn't know enough to make that choice." "No," Garrett said, "but you knew enough to keep listening, and that tells me what I needed to know." No one expected what came next. Jordan read the notebook while Garrett waited. He read it in the same systematic way he examined objects. Start to finish, no skipping, no jumping to conclusions. He read every entry, dates, coordinates. Operational summaries in abbreviated language he had to work to decode, but could decode. Because the language of military operations had patterns, and once you identified the pattern, the abbreviations resolved into plain meaning. OP-7. Target confirmed. Deploy Team Alpha. Authorization, Cardinal 3. Execute 22 NOV-74. OP-8. Dual target package. Extraction first. If unable extract, proceed to elimination. Authorize Cardinal 3. Execute 01DC-74. OP-11. Target. Provincial Administrator Svei Rieng, complications, secondary contact eliminated, cover established. After action, Cardinal 3 authorization confirmed, incident classified. Date, 14 Jan 75. Jordan read OP-11's entry 3 times, secondary contact eliminated. The language of bureaucracy applied to the fact of civilian death. He turned to the page at the back of the notebook where Garrett had kept a roster. 12 names. Operational designations paired with what appeared to be real names. He found Cardinal 3 D.A. Harwell, Yale Law 69, NSC Liaison D.C. 74. Below the roster, a note in a different pen, written later, the ink slightly different in color. 3 initials followed by dates: JMT, AUG 76, R.K. Wells, NOV 76, Dalton, APR 77, missing presumed. Jordan looked up. These initials at the back: JMT, R.K. Wells, Dalton. Team members, Garrett said. The ones I'm certain didn't survive the program's termination. And the others? The remaining 9? 6 I've tracked. Most are still alive under identities that are not their own. 2 I've lost track of. 1, he paused. 1 you're looking at. Jordan blinked, then understood. He looked again at the roster, found an entry he had overlooked. Rover 4, B.A. Garrett, Logistics and Ground Coordination. He looked at Garrett. You were in that photograph. Second from the left, front row. Jordan pulled the photograph back out. Front row, second from left. A younger version of the man across the counter, significantly younger, the face unlined, the jaw defined, but the eyes the same. That particular quality of watchfulness that had unsettled Jordan from the moment the man walked in. It did not come from age. It came from training. It came from years of being in places where not watching carefully enough could kill you. You've been carrying this alone for 50 years, Jordan said. Garrett said nothing, but something moved across his face. Not emotion exactly, more the shadow of where emotion had been before it burned away into something more durable, something that lived in the body instead of the face. That's when things took a darker turn. At 1:15 in the afternoon, someone knocked on the locked front door of Meridian Antiques. Jordan went to the window. Outside stood a woman in her mid-40s, dark suit, short hair, carrying a government-issue briefcase. She was not trying to look casual. She was not trying to look threatening either. She just stood and waited. Beside her, a younger man, similar suit, similar bearing. Jordan went back to the counter. "Federal agents," he said. Garrett nodded once. "Let them in. They might take the documents." "They won't." Something in his certainty made Jordan believe him, though the reason was not yet visible. Jordan unlocked the front door. The woman entered first. She looked around the shop with the systematic eye sweep Jordan had learned to recognize as either law enforcement training or military habit. Her gaze settled on Garrett, held for a moment, moved to the documents on the counter, held again. "Mr. Kessler," she said. "My name is Agent Sandra Voss, Defense Intelligence Agency. This is Agent Truman." She produced credentials, held them for Jordan to examine. He examined them. They appeared legitimate. "Mr. Garrett," she continued, "we've been looking for you." "I know," Garrett said. Voss moved toward the counter, looked at the documents spread across it. Her expression was professional but not blank. Jordan could see recognition in it. She had been briefed. She knew what she was looking at. "We need to take those," she said. "No," Garrett said. Voss looked at him. "Mr. Garrett, these materials are classified. Their possession by unauthorized civilians is a federal—" "These materials," Garrett said, "were classified 40 years ago under a program that was itself unauthorized. You cannot apply classification protections to documents that prove the classification was used to cover up illegal operations." Voss was quiet for 2 seconds. Then, "That's a legal argument that would need to be tested in court." "I agree," Garrett said, "and I'm prepared for that. What I'm not prepared for is having these materials removed from this location before their existence has been independently established." Jordan watched the exchange. Voss and Garrett were speaking to each other with the particular tone of people who have been on opposite sides of a situation for a long time without meeting directly. There was history in the cadence, not personal history, institutional. "What do you want?" Voss asked. "The same thing I've wanted for 30 years, Garrett said. "Recognition. Not for me. I don't need a medal. I need a congressional record to acknowledge that Operation Brushfire Redux existed, that it was conducted after Phoenix's official termination, and that the civilian casualties of Operation 11 were wrongly classified and deserve recognition as victims of an unauthorized operation." "And Harwell?" Garrett looked at her steadily. "That's for the appropriate oversight body to determine. I'm not asking for prosecution. I'm asking for truth. Harwell cannot sit on the Armed Services Committee and oversee classified military programs while having a classified operational history he has never disclosed. That's not politics. That's simple institutional integrity." Voss looked at Agent Truman. Some communication passed between them that Jordan could not read. "I need to make a call," she said. She walked to the far end of the shop. Her voice was low. Jordan could not hear the words. He could see her posture, straight, slightly tense, the kind of tension that comes from delivering news to someone above you in a chain of command who is not going to be pleased. Jordan leaned toward Garrett. "Did you know she would come?" "I expected someone," Garrett said quietly. "DIA was more likely than CIA at this point. CIA has more to lose. DIA has more to gain." "Gain how?" "Internal politics," Garrett said. Brushfire Redux was a CIA-run operation. If its existence and its abuses become official record, it damages the agency significantly. DIA has no stake in protecting it. Some people in DIA have been waiting for an opportunity like this for decades. Jordan looked at the woman on the phone, reconsidered everything he thought was happening. "She's not here to suppress it," he said. "I don't believe so," Garrett said. "No. I believe she may be here to help." What happened next changed everything. Voss came back. She stood at the counter, looked at Garrett, looked at Jordan and said, "We have a proposal." The proposal took 20 minutes to explain. Jordan listened, took notes, asked 3 questions. Garrett listened without moving, without asking anything until the end. The DIA had been aware of Brushfire Redux's existence since 1988. They had their own partial records, incomplete, fragmented, filed in a sub-classified system that was itself only partially accessible to current DIA staff. They had known for 7 years that Harwell's operational history had not been fully disclosed. They had not acted, because acting required physical evidence that their own records could not provide. The original authorizations, the operational logs, the photograph. The photograph most of all. Because the photograph proved presence. Not communication, not authorization alone, physical presence. 12 people in a clearing in Cambodia in 1974. One of them Cardinal 3. Authorization stamps could be disputed. Presence in the field could not. The proposal: Garrett would provide the original documents to a secure archival facility under a joint DIA Congressional Research Service custodial arrangement. The documents would be examined by 3 independent authentication experts. A Congressional Intelligence Subcommittee, not the Armed Services Committee, a separate body, would be notified of their existence and their relevance to Harwell's upcoming confirmation. Garrett would provide sworn testimony in a closed session. In exchange, Garrett's identity would not be exposed publicly. His operational history would be acknowledged in the closed session record, but not in any public document. The other surviving team members, those who could be located, would be offered the same treatment. An Operation 11 civilian casualties, 3 names: a provincial administrator's assistant, a market trader, a 12-year-old boy who had been in the wrong place at the wrong moment of a wrong decision made by 28-year-old men who believed they understood what was necessary. Those names would be entered into the official record as victims of an unauthorized U.S. military operation and acknowledged as such in the congressional record. Not compensation, not justice in the full legal sense, but truth. Official, recorded, archived truth. Garrett was silent for a long time after Voss finished, long enough that the silence itself became something Jordan felt physically, a weight distributed through the air of the room. Then Garrett said, "The boy's name was Kieng Piseth. He was selling fruit. He was there because his mother sent him out early that morning because they were low on money and the market opened at 6. Voss said nothing. "I need his name in the record," Garrett said. "Spelled correctly. Full name. His mother's name if it can be determined. I have it in my notes." He touched the notebook. "She survived. I don't know if she's still alive. If she is—" He stopped. "We'll make every effort," Voss said. "That's not enough. Mr. Garrett, I have sat with Kieng Piseth's name for 50 years, Garrett said. His voice had not risen. It had, if anything, dropped lower. But it carried absolute weight, the weight of 50 years of private accounting. "I do not need more effort. I need certainty." The room was completely silent. Jordan had stopped writing. The pen rested against the notepad. He was watching a man who had carried something impossible for half a century, finally setting it down in the only place it could rest, in the presence of people who had the institutional authority to make it matter. Voss nodded. "Certified. We'll make it certified." "Then we have a deal," Garrett said. But that wasn't the full story. Not yet. After Voss and Agent Truman left, taking nothing, leaving a DIA contact card and a classified case number that Garrett put in his shirt pocket, Jordan stood at the counter and looked at the documents that were still spread across its surface. "She didn't take them," he said. "She doesn't need to," Garrett said. "Not yet. They'll be collected through proper channels within 48 hours. A courier, documents and chain of custody." "And you trust that?" Garrett considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. "I trust that their institutional interests align with mine at this particular moment. That's not the same as trust, but it's enough." Jordan looked at the photograph. 12 faces. The front row, second from the left. Garrett, 50 years younger. "What happened to you after the program ended?" Jordan asked. "Personally." Garrett was quiet for a moment. "I was a logistics officer," he said. "I ran supply chains and safe houses and human asset networks. I was good at it. I was told I was good at it, and I believed that because believing it made the work feel purposeful. I had a clearance and a cover identity and a contact number I called every Thursday, and the contact number stopped being answered in March 1975. He looked at his hands. "I was in Bangkok when Saigon fell. I watched it on a television in a hotel bar, the helicopter footage from the embassy roof, and I understood that everything I had been a part of was now either officially denied or officially forgotten, and that I had a choice about what to do with that understanding." "What did you choose?" "I chose to survive first. New identity wasn't hard. I had enough residual contacts. I came back to the States in 1976, built a life, married, raised 2 children who think their father was a civil engineer who worked overseas in the 1970s. A pause. He was not wrong about the overseas part. "Your children don't know. My wife knew. I told her in 1983, 8 years in, when the weight became too much to carry alone. She held it with me." His voice shifted, something different in the texture of it. "She died 4 years ago." Jordan said nothing. What was there to say? "After she died," Garrett continued, "I realized I had been waiting for something that would never arrive on its own, that Harwell would be held accountable, that the record would be corrected, that Kieng Piseth's name would matter to someone with authority to make it matter. I had been waiting for an external event to make the action happen. But the event I was waiting for was the chairmanship, and it was coming in 12 days. Jordan looked at the notepad where he had been writing. Pages of notes, the beginning of a record. "You said earlier that physical objects can't be faked," Jordan said. Old paper, old photographs. You came here for the authentication. Partly. What's the other part? Garrett looked at him directly for the first time since he had entered the shop. The quality of the gaze was different now. Not the watchful assessment of the early morning, but something more direct, more personal. You're young, he said. Younger than my children. You have 30 years ahead of you in which this story might still matter, still be actionable, still be useful. I needed someone young enough to remember. Jordan felt the weight of that settle on him, not as burden, as purpose. And why me specifically? I walked into 3 antique shops this month, Garrett said. 2 of them I left within 5 minutes. The owners saw the bag, saw an old man, made a calculation about profit and value, and decided there was nothing worth their time. You looked at the bag for 5 seconds before picking it up. You looked before you touched. That's just habit. No, Garrett said. That's respect, for objects, for history, for the possibility that something that looks worthless might be the most important thing in the room. He paused. I needed someone who understood that things are not always what they appear to be on the surface. And that's when Jordan understood what he had really been chosen for. Jordan spent the next 2 hours doing what he did professionally. He appraised the materials. He did it properly. He photographed each document with his professional camera under controlled lighting. He measured and logged each item, dimensions, condition, estimated age range, observable physical characteristics. He used his magnification equipment to examine the paper stock, the typewriter impression depth, the photographic emulsion on the images. He ran a portable UV light across the documents, looking for signs of artificial aging or chemical treatment. He found none. His professional conclusion, which he typed up on his shop letterhead and signed, "The materials presented by Bernard Allen Garrett on September 28th, consisting of 1 canvas military duffel bag, mid-1970s manufacture, olive drab canvas, U.S. Army specification, 1 topographic military map, paper stock and printing method consistent with 1970-1975 U.S. military specification, 23 pages of typed documentation on government specification paper, ink oxidation and paper composition consistent with 1973-1976 origin, 1 composition notebook with handwritten entries, paper and ink consistent with 1974-1975 origin, 31 photographic prints, emulsion type, and paper stock consistent with 1970s military field photography, and 1 sealed personal envelope, all appear to be authentic period materials consistent with their represented provenance. At the bottom, I, Jordan A. Kessler, appraiser and proprietor of Meridian Antiques and Collectibles, certify that the above assessment was made to professional standards on this date with no prior knowledge of the material's content or historical significance. He handed Garrett a copy, kept one for his own files, photographed the document, sent a copy to his business email, sent a copy to his personal email from a different device. This won't save anything by itself, Jordan said. No, Garrett agreed, but it establishes that the objects are real, that they existed in the world outside any government archive on this date, that an independent professional examined them and found them authentic. He stood at the counter holding the copy of the appraisal. For a moment, Jordan saw something on his face that had not been there before. Not relief. Relief implies tension releasing, and the tension in Bernard Garrett's face was the structural kind, the kind that had been there so long it had become architecture. This was different. This was something smaller and more specific. This was the look of a man who had written something down and handed it to someone and watched them take responsibility for knowing. Thank you, Garrett said. Jordan looked at him. Don't thank me. Tell me what I do now. If someone comes for these, they'll come through the DIA channel, 48 hours. You'll receive a call from a specific number. Garrett wrote it on a slip of paper from the notepad. And they'll arrange collection. If anyone comes before that call without that number, the answer is no, non-negotiable. And if I hear nothing in 48 hours, then something has gone wrong, and you call the number on the bottom of that slip instead. That's an attorney. She's been retained for this possibility since 2019. Jordan took both slips. He looked at the second number, a Chicago area code. You planned this completely, he said. I'm 83 years old, Garrett said. I have had time to plan. He began carefully rewrapping the documents in the wax paper. His movements were precise and deliberate. Jordan watched. There was something ceremonial in the handling. 50 years of keeping these things safe, reduced to the muscle memory of wrapping and tying, the movements of someone who had done this in darkness, in urgency, in desperation, and could now do it in the calm light of a Tuesday afternoon in a shop on Halsted Street. Is there anything you want people to know? Jordan asked. Not about Harwell, about you, about what you did. Garrett finished tying the twine, smoothed the wax paper, set the packet on the counter, and rested his hands on either side of it. I want people to know that the 12 people in that photograph went to Cambodia because they believed it mattered, he said. Some of them were wrong to believe that. I was wrong about some of it. The certainty we had was, he paused, it was the certainty of young men who had been told their country needed them and had not yet learned to question what the need would cost. He looked at the photograph one last time. Kiang Piseth was 12 years old. He was selling fruit at a market. He died in a firefight that should never have happened, authorized by a man who is now about to oversee every classified military operation in the United States government. He looked at Jordan. That's what I want people to know. Not my story, his. He placed the photograph, the one from the oilcloth, the 12 faces, on the counter beside the packed documents. Keep that one, he said, for the record. And then Bernard Garrett walked out of Meridian Antiques and Collectibles, out through the front door that Jordan unlocked and held open, out onto Halsted Street in the September afternoon, and turned left toward the bus stop, and Jordan watched him go until the gray wool sweater was indistinguishable from the crowd. But that wasn't the end. Not even close. The DIA courier arrived at 10:20 the following morning. A woman in civilian clothes, professional, efficient. She showed credentials, provided the specific number Garrett had given Jordan, presented a chain of custody documentation form that was professionally drafted and legally precise. Jordan photographed the form before signing. He photographed the courier's credentials. He photographed the process of collection. He kept the photograph. The 12 faces in the jungle clearing. He kept his signed appraisal. He kept his notes. He also kept, in the back of his personal safe, something he had not told Garrett about. A set of his own photographs of every document taken during the appraisal process. 41 images, high resolution, backed up to 3 separate cloud services under encrypted folders before the courier arrived. It was not a betrayal. It was a continuation of the function Garrett had assigned him. Verifier, witness, someone whose professional responsibility required the maintenance of independent documentation. On the third day after the visit, Jordan received a call from a blocked number, a voice he did not recognize, male, older. Mr. Kessler, I'm with the Office of the Congressional Intelligence Oversight Subcommittee. I've been asked to let you know that your appraisal documentation has been entered into a classified evidentiary record. Your testimony may be requested in approximately 3 weeks. Jordan said he would be available. He asked, what happens to Harwell? That's not something I can discuss, the voice said. The 3 civilians from Operation 11, Jordan said. Kiang Piseth, the other 2. Are their names going into the record? A pause longer than was comfortable. Yes, the voice said finally. They are. Jordan thanked him and hung up. He went to the front window. The street outside was the same. Bus, foot traffic, the men in construction gear gone now, replaced by a woman walking a dog and a delivery truck idling outside the restaurant across the street. Normal Tuesday on a normal street in a normal city. But the photograph on the counter behind him had 12 faces in it, and one of those faces belonged to a man who was currently ranked second in seniority on the House Armed Services Committee, and in 9 days was scheduled to be confirmed as its chair. Jordan looked up the congressional hearing schedule. October 15th. 9 days. He sat down at his desk in the back office, opened his laptop. In the search bar he typed, Chiang Piseth, Cambodia. He found nothing. There would be nothing to find. A 12-year-old boy selling fruit at a market in 1975 did not leave a digital trace. The erasure was not intentional. It was structural. The world had not yet built systems for recording people like Chiang Piseth. Only the people who failed them had systems. Only the people who had resources and institutional power and classification authority had left records. Jordan closed the laptop, looked at the photograph. What happened next changed everything. 3 days before the Harwell confirmation hearing, a story appeared in the Washington Post. Not a front-page story, a B-section item, below the fold, short. The headline read, Armed Services Chairmanship Hearing Postponed Pending Review of Candidate Background Documentation. The story contained no details about the nature of the background review. It quoted a congressional spokesperson who said only that the committee was in receipt of materials requiring additional analysis and that the hearing would be rescheduled within 60 days. Jordan read the story at his shop counter. He read it twice. Then he set his phone face down on the counter and looked at the ceiling and thought about a man 83 years old in a gray wool sweater walking away through a crowd on Halsted Street, carrying the weight of 50 years of a private accounting that the world had never seen. He thought about Chiang Piseth, 12 years old, selling fruit. He thought about what it meant for a truth to matter, whether a truth that was classified, sealed, processed through institutional channels and never made fully public, whether that truth counted as having mattered, whether the accounting was complete if the public record was closed. He did not have an answer. He thought about what Garrett had said. I want people to know that the 12 people in that photograph went to Cambodia because they believed it mattered. Did that make it matter? The belief? Was believing you were serving your country, even if you were wrong about what that service required, wrong about its cost? Was that a partial absolution, or was it the deepest indictment? Jordan did not have answers to any of these questions. He was not sure answers were the point. The point was the photograph. The 12 faces. Garrett, second from left, 50 years younger, eyes already carrying that quality of watchfulness that would never leave him. Harwell, near the right edge of the back row, jaw set, looking at something outside the frame with the confidence of a man who believed he understood the world he was operating in. And the 3 people not in the photograph, the provincial administrator's assistant, the market trader, Chiang Piseth, not in the photograph, because they had not been part of the plan. They were not supposed to be there. They were the accident of certainty, the cost that comes when people with absolute authority make decisions without accounting for the full weight of what that authority can do. Jordan reached into the drawer beneath the register, pulled out the notepad where he had taken notes during Garrett's 2-hour account. He turned to a blank page. He began to write. Not an appraisal, not a professional document. Just the story, as Garrett had told it to him, in the order it had been told, with all the details intact. The routing log and the 11 numbered points on the map, the operational designations and the real names behind them, the authorization stamps and the signature of Cardinal 3, the firefight on January 14, 1975, and the 3 people who had not been supposed to be there, and the cover report that made them disappear. And Chiang Piseth, 12 years old, selling fruit. He wrote for an hour. When he was done, he read it back. Then he sealed it in an envelope, addressed it to himself, and mailed it from the post office 2 blocks away with a certified mail tracking number. A physical record, independent of digital systems, carrying a postmark that established existence on a specific date. A verifier's instinct. No one expected what came next. 3 weeks after Garrett's visit, Jordan received the call requesting testimony. He drove to Washington on a Monday morning, arrived at an unmarked government building 2 blocks from the Capitol, was escorted to a conference room with 6 people in it, 2 congressional staffers, 2 intelligence oversight officers, a court reporter, and an empty chair for the witness. He sat in the chair. He answered questions for 2 hours. He described every detail of September 28th, from the moment Garrett walked in to the moment he watched him walk away. He described the documents as an appraiser would: physical characteristics, observable properties, authenticated characteristics. He described the phone call from the unknown number at 11:47. He described Agent Voss's visit. He described what Garrett had told him about the program, about Cardinal 3, about Operation 11. At the end of the questioning, one of the congressional staffers, a woman who had said almost nothing for the previous 2 hours, asked him, "Mr. Kessler, in your professional opinion, are these materials consistent with the historical account Mr. Garrett provided?" Jordan said, "In my professional opinion, yes. The physical materials are authentic to the period. The documentation is consistent with military operational records of the era. The photograph is consistent with 1974 field photography. I found no evidence of fabrication or forgery." The staffer nodded, made a note. "And personally," she said, "off the record, what do you think happened?" Jordan considered the question, looked at his hands on the conference table. "I think 12 people went to Cambodia because they believed it mattered," he said. "I think some of them were wrong about what it required. I think a 12-year-old boy sold fruit at a market and never went home. And I think that for 50 years, a man named Bernard Garrett carried that knowledge alone because no one else was willing to." He looked up. "I think that's worth a record," he said. "Whatever happens with Harwell, whatever the institutional consequences are, what Garrett did by keeping those documents, by carrying that weight, by finally bringing it into the open, that deserves to be recorded accurately, not classified, not sealed, recorded." The staffer looked at him for a moment, then nodded once. "Thank you, Mr. Kessler." Jordan drove home. He returned to the shop. He turned on the lights, unlocked the front door, flipped the sign to open. He stood behind the counter and looked at the photograph of 12 faces, which he had placed in a frame and hung on the wall behind the register. The morning light came through the front window and fell across the counter. The photograph watched from the wall, fixed in its 1974 moment, permanent and unalterable. The shop opened for business, but that wasn't the end. The Harwell hearing was ultimately rescheduled twice. In December, a different story appeared, not in the Post, but in a national intelligence trade publication that served the professional community in Washington. The headline was technical, specialist, the kind that only people deeply embedded in that world would notice. Armed Services, Chairmanship, candidate withdraws, citing health concerns. No further details, no explanation. Health concerns. Jordan read it on his phone, standing in the back room of Meridian Antiques, while a customer examined a set of vintage navigation instruments in the front. He set the phone down. He thought about what health concerns meant in Washington when it appeared without details in a story about a man whose background documentation had required additional analysis. He thought about the arithmetic of institutional power. How much is revealed? How much is managed? How much simply never surfaces in public form because the people with authority over the record decide that partial truth is safer than complete truth. He was not satisfied by this. He did not expect to be. Satisfaction was not the point, Garrett had said. The point was the record. The point was Kiang Piseth's name in the congressional record, correctly spelled, confirmed, officially acknowledged as a civilian casualty of an unauthorized U.S. military operation. Jordan had received confirmation of that 3 weeks earlier in a brief letter from the Intelligence Subcommittee's staff director. 1 paragraph. The names, all 3 of the Operation 11 civilian casualties, were in the closed session record, certified. The letter also noted that the DIA was working to locate surviving family members. Jordan pinned the letter to the corkboard behind his desk. He read it occasionally. Not for comfort exactly, more the way you return to something that marks a specific point. A before and after. Before September 28th, a shop that sold old things to people who valued history. After September 28th, something harder to name. A place that had participated in the movement of truth from one place to another, from a false bottom to a recorded page. Bernard Garrett came back in January. Jordan saw him through the front window before he entered. The grey wool sweater again, though a different one, the khaki trousers, the Risoled work boots. The same deliberate walk, weight even, shoulders squared. Jordan unlocked the door before Garrett reached it. The old man entered, looked around the shop with the same systematic sweep he had used in September. His gaze settled on the photograph on the wall. He looked at it for a moment. "Good frame," he said. "Thank you," Jordan said. They stood on either side of the counter in the same positions they had occupied in September. The space between them was different now, not empty, occupied by shared knowledge, shared history, shared responsibility. "How are you?" Jordan asked. Garrett appeared to consider the question with the same seriousness he had applied to everything else. "Old," he said. "But the good kind of old, the kind that has done what it needed to do." Jordan nodded. "I received word," Garrett said, "about the 3 names in the record. The subcommittee's staff director confirmed it directly." "I received a letter," Jordan said. "Same confirmation." Garrett nodded slowly, the kind of nod that contains years. "Kiang Piseth's mother," Garrett said. "She died in 1991, but she had 2 daughters. They're still alive, one in Phnom Penh, one in France." He paused. A representative from the embassy in Cambodia reached out to them, explained in limited terms what the acknowledgement meant. Another pause. The daughter in Phnom Penh asked for her brother's name to be pronounced correctly in the official reading. Kiang is the family name. Piseth is the given name. She wanted to make sure the record said it in the right order. Jordan felt something move through him that was not quite any single emotion, but contained elements of several. "Did they get it right?" he asked. "They corrected it," Garrett said, "before the final certification." Jordan looked at the photograph on the wall, 12 faces, 1974, the jungle clearing, the young men who believed they understood what they were doing. "What do you do now?" Jordan asked. Garrett looked at the photograph as well. "I have 2 children who think their father was a civil engineer," he said. "I'm going to tell them the truth. They're old enough. They deserve to know who I actually was, and what I did, and what I've been carrying. That's going to be hard." "Yes," Garrett said, "but not as hard as 50 more years of not saying it." He reached into the pocket of the wool sweater, produced something small, set it on the counter. A brass button, military-issue style, the kind sewn onto the breast pocket of a field jacket. Tarnished, nearly black, but the relief visible, an eagle holding arrows, a shield. "From the field jacket in the bag," Garrett said. "It fell off when I was packing. Keep it." Jordan picked it up, held it. It was heavier than it looked. Not physically, the physical weight was nothing, but in the particular way that some objects carry weight without density, the accumulated gravity of what they have survived. "Thank you," Jordan said. "No," Garrett said. "That's mine to say." He extended his hand. Jordan took it. The grip was firm and brief and final, in the way that only the handshakes of very old men who have resolved something can be. Then Bernard Garrett walked to the door, and Jordan held it open. And the January cold came in for a moment, as the old man stepped out onto the sidewalk and turned left and walked toward the bus stop and did not look back. Jordan stood in the doorway. The cold air carried the smell of the city, exhaust, food from the restaurant across the street, the particular sharpness of winter in Chicago that cut through everything else and reminded you where you were. He held the brass button in his closed hand, felt its weight. He looked up at the sky. Gray and low, the particular featureless gray of a Midwest winter morning. A bus passed. A woman walked by quickly, head down against the wind. Normal. Entirely, completely normal, except for the photograph on the wall behind him, the 12 faces, the jungle clearing, the 1974 morning that had threaded itself through 50 years and found its way to a Tuesday in September, and a counter in Chicago, and an antiques dealer who had learned to look before touching, and a brass button in his closed hand, and a name in a congressional record, correctly spelled, correctly ordered, Kiang Piseth, 12 years old, selling fruit, finally remembered. Jordan went back inside. He walked to the wall behind the register and held the brass button up beside the photograph. Looked at them together for a long moment. Then he found a small piece of velvet in the supply cabinet, the kind he used for displaying small items in the cases, and set the button on it on the shelf below the photograph. He made a small card in the same format he used for display items, printed it on cardstock, placed it beside the button. It read, U.S. Military Issue Button, Mid-1970s. Provenance, Operation Brushfire Redux, Cambodia, 1974-1975. Donated by B.A. Garrett, Case Officer, Reti. In memory of Kiang Piseth, civilian casualty, January 14, 1975, age 12. He stepped back and looked at it. Outside, the city moved through its Tuesday morning. The bus came and went. The restaurant across the street opened its door, releasing the smell of breakfast into the cold air. A child walked by holding an adult's hand. Inside Meridian Antiques and Collectibles, the morning light fell across the counter and climbed the wall to where 12 faces watched from 1974, and below them a single brass button sat on velvet with a card that made one name permanent in the small, stubborn way that objects can make things permanent. Not classified, not sealed, not managed, just there, present, real. The truth that had survived a false bottom and 50 years of silence and the careful planning of an 83-year-old man who understood that objects cannot be edited. Jordan opened the register, checked the security camera, started the morning. At 9, the first customer arrived with a box of his grandfather's things, looking for someone who might understand what they were worth. Jordan set down his coffee. He looked before touching. He always looked before touching now. Some truths wait in false bottoms for 50 years. Some names take 50 years to be said correctly. And some antiques dealers in Chicago discover that the most valuable thing in any collection is not what appears on the surface. If someone brought a bag into your life today and asked you to pull the bottom, would you?